That sounds good.
Awesome. So first off, honestly, thank you guys so much for talking to me. This is probably the coolest interview I've ever done for the site. Because we're, small time site out here in Toronto. So just to kick things off, I'd love to know a little bit about both of you and how you guys fell in love with film and more specifically composing.
Well, we grew up in Burlington, so just down the road, and we had probably a pretty standard kind of suburban upbringing. We had piano lessons and had choir and listened to music, pop music as kids, and classical music, and our parents were both musical, and so there was a lot of music, all kinds of stuff from jazz and big band and Rodgers and Hammerstein and all kinds of things, and then a lot of classical music. So that's how we started, and then I'm the older one by 6 years, and I started with piano lessons and really just loved classical music. As Jeff then started piano lessons, which he liked somewhat less.
Somewhat.
He morphed over to guitar as soon as he could. But yeah, and so we grew up in the same house with the same music around us. Both of us, like within everything we heard, I gravitated sort of towards the classical stuff. Jeff gravitated towards pop music. As we grew up as teenagers, we ended up playing in bands together. I played synths and keyboard. I then went on to the University of Toronto, studied composition, and
you went to the University of Toronto?
I did, yeah, the music faculty there. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I started at Master. I did 1 year at McMaster, and then I moved to Toronto, and I transferred to the University of Toronto, and just really loved the program there. It really kind of exposed me to a lot of different kinds of music, all kinds of non-Western music that was kind of, just because of multiculturalism in the 70s, there was a lot of kind of excitement about the new communities that were in Toronto, and lots of different kinds of music to be heard by them. And in the program, like in the atrium, in the music faculty building, there used to be like weekly concerts by various non-Western groups, African drummers or gamelan groups or whatever, early music groups. And so all this stuff just was super exciting to me. And I started working with theater groups around campus and just using the music that I was excited by, which was, what I was hearing, the world music and early music and Renaissance and music and things like that. So I just started using that kind of thing in the theater work that I was doing. And then through a mutual acquaintance was introduced to someone else in the theater department who was Adam Egoyan, who was about to make a feature film. And we met, and neither of us knew kind of anything about so-called Hollywood movie making, but we just made a film together, and that's how it all kicked off. And then basically once I had my career in film kind of going, I was doing small independent Canadian films and television, and Jeff was still playing guitar and playing in bands, and I needed a guitar part for one of the things I was working on. Actually, I think a couple of films we did where he came in and played as a session player, and then I was getting busier, and I said, why don't you work on this one with me? And he really quickly just dialed right into what needed to be done, and just had a natural aptitude, just like from the first cue he ever wrote. And and so that's basically the history of how we ended up writing film music.
Did you guys have any specific filmmaking inspirations growing up that kind of influenced your composing today?
We were slightly oblivious to it. We definitely were film fans, and our dad loved the epic Sandal flicks, so we heard a lot of Bernstein and Rosa growing up, those kind of things. So without knowing it, we were surrounded, by some of the best scores ever written, and I really do think that actually informed what we did all these years later. But at the time, no, we were just kids taking in, great movies and great scores. And it wasn't until, Mike originally fell into it the first time that we went, oh, well, this is a really legitimate outlet for being creative and writing music. And we just, it's gone from there.
How would you guys describe?
I would say honestly, like we were just both really interested in music. Music came first to us, like as we were growing up, and we saw films in theaters and all that. But there was never a moment. Neither of us ever growing up went, "Oh, I want to be a film composer." I mean, in Burlington, Ontario, in the '70s, felt so far away from Hollywood. Like there was just no possible way that. It was like another planet. So it wasn't like an option that you could, and there's no internet, so you couldn't like research it like that or anything. So it just felt like, that was just not anything possible. And frankly, neither of us were really that interested in it. We heard those scores and definitely noted them, but certainly never thought, oh, that's what we want to be when we grow up.
How would you describe your respective creative processes, and how do you solve creative differences amongst you guys? Because I like asking siblings that.
Our process is that we will take the film, when we start on a film together, start to get that idea of the concept of what the film is, what its needs are. And sometimes before we meet the filmmakers, but always after, we'll start to divide up. We'll start to talk about what the score is as a concept, broad strokes, the job the music's going to need to do in the movie. And then we'll start to divide up the tasks, in a sort of workmanlike way. Like, well, we'll need like on Onward, we said, well, Ian's going to need a theme with a great arc because he has a great character arc. So we're going to need a theme for Ian that has a very specific set of qualities that can change from something small and folky to something full-throated and large at the end. We're going to need a quest theme. We're going to need a magic theme. So we start with dividing up, seeing what the needs of the themes are, once we have an overview. And then what we'll do is we'll go to the part of the film where maybe that concept of that theme can be best basically experimented with or played with. So like in Onward, we went to the scene where Ian goes to school the first day, because that was a long scene and it gives you a lot of room to sort of spin out some ideas. And then we just start woodshedding and you start playing it a little bit up against picture, a little bit not against picture. And we just kind of go back and forth like that. That's sort of how we lay the groundwork for what we're going to do. Creative differences, I don't even really tend to think of them as that, because really the big task is the film and answering that question and trying to solve the film. So, if I write something and I send it over to Mike, he goes, I don't know if this really works. I'm really just thinking, okay, well then what will work? It's a very pragmatic approach, and you have to be with filmmaking. You don't really have time to be petty or egotistical about it or precious. It's really like a race against the clock to solve filmic problems with music. So if I send something over and he goes, yeah, I don't know, I certainly don't think the second half is the best B part we could have, then I'm, once in a while I'll be surprised and think, I thought that was pretty good. But then I'll go, okay, well, what is going to work? And you just jump into it like that, because the overall challenge is, filling a film with music that follows story and character arcs, represents the inner life of the characters, the inner life of the film. Those are huge challenges, and we just don't have a lot of time to be, slinging mud around with those kind of tasks at hand.
Right. It's all for the greater good of the picture.
It's hard enough, believe me.
Oh, I'm sure. So my first exposure to both of you was Michael's score in Girl Interrupted, which is one of my personal favorite scores. So this question is directly for Michael. What drew you to such like a powerful piece of filmmaking like that? Like what was it about the story that made you want to be a part of that project?
Well, I started just the history, I guess, leading to that would be my first director, Egoyan, highly, highly respected director amongst other directors, especially. So, I couldn't have asked for a better kind of person to begin with. First of all, he and I are like very locked in together as far as our aesthetic and as far as our approach and our feelings of how music best helps tell a story. It'll be more well-known directors come all the planet started being exposed to my work, and I had Mira Nair in New York, then Ang Lee, and then I'm working on films here in Los Angeles. Joel Schumacher called me first, and then Girl Interrupted, James Mangold, the director, who continues to be, a fantastic director, a meaningful director, 20 years later. I guess that film is 20 years old now.
Yeah.
He'd heard my I think in some of Adam's films and knew that like for this kind of journey, this psychological kind of study of these girls in this asylum, this sort of place where they were, up again, and you look at this cast and it's kind of insane. Like it's kind of every it girl, like before they were the it girl, all in one picture, and they're all still, except Brittany Murphy, of course, God rest her soul, but they're all like super influential actors still, and the story is a fun one for a composer because there's all this internal world that is so real to these characters, and one of the things I wanted to do was use some unusual instruments. I wanted to, there was kind of two layers of the music. There's this kind of superficial, we're in the 70s, and there's that kind of vibe going on. And in fact, Jeff played a lot of the acoustic guitar in the film. And then there's kind of this other deeper layer, which we used the Toronto ensemble called the Glass Orchestra. All their instruments are made of glass, and they're blown or struck or bowed, but they're all glass, and it's not only a visually amazing ensemble, but really has this incredible quality, and you can just hear the fragility and all the qualities that glass has. It's fragile, it's dangerous as well. It can be, smooth or knife-like, or and then there's kind of in the film, there's all these scenes of people observing the girls through windows and glass and things. So it's really ensemble just really made a lot of sense to help tell the story. So that's how that all happened, and it was it was a really fun score to do, and just a great team of filmmakers, and I'm really, really proud of that film.
It's interesting that you say like more unusual instruments, because I don't know if the viewer picks up on that immediately, but the more I think about it now, like songs like The Tunnels, which is probably my favorite song from the soundtrack, you're right, it is like some more unusual sounds. That's really cool.
Yeah. I think that, that's something Jeff and I have done like through our whole body of work is, first of all, we try and make each score really bespoke, really exactly fitting the story, and a very, very specific. And the way you make it specific is not to just have a big orchestra for every score. You certainly can do that, and that's valid too. But we like to, mix in different instruments, different sounds that are really suited to help tell the story that will make you, when you hear that instrument, will make you think, oh yeah, Girl Interrupted or Onward or whatever, so that it's really kind of a unique sound that we build. And that's one thing we work hard on doing, is finding which instruments are best, suited for that story.
So I've pushed it on, but now I definitely want to talk about your work with Disney and Pixar. Can you describe what the pitch was like for Onward?
It was a singular kind of pitch, one that I think we'll never forget. We had worked on The Good Dinosaur in, I believe, 2015. So they knew who we were at Pixar, and we had a relationship with them. And we got this call from Tom McDougall, the head of music, and he said, so look, we want you to come up and talk to somebody, a guy named Dan Scanlon at Pixar. And we said, well, great. What do we want to talk about? And he said, well, you just come up. So we had no idea what it was. We knew who Dan was. We knew his films before this, but we didn't know anything else. And we got up there and we met Dan, and he sat down and he started to talk, and he didn't stop talking for about 20 minutes. And he unspooled this, remarkable story that is the story in Onward, that he's prefaced by saying, this is a story about me and my brother growing up. And he started to tell this story that started to sound eerily familiar to Mike and I, who had a very similar young story to Dan and his brother, who grew up a stone's throw away in Michigan from where we grew up outside Toronto. Two boys lose their father when they're young. The brothers in the story are 19 and 16, I believe, in Onward, and we were 19 and 13 in our lives. And wow. Then he went on to say Dad was an accountant in his story, and we were like, wow, that Dad was an accountant in our story too. The whole thing was just kind of crazy. And, we sort of sat there trying to eat, but really just kind of stunned and amazed, and definitely taken by how emotionally invested Dan was in this story. We immediately had a good feeling about where the film was going to go, just because he was so committed to telling us the way he told this story. You could tell he was really feeling it. It was really close to his heart. And, we found in the arts that, the filmmakers who are telling the stories that mean the most to them, those are going to be the best films. So we thought, well, this is pretty amazing. And he said, I've heard some of your music. I really like the emotionality of what you guys do. And we'll talk to you later. And that was, we got back in the car, and they drove us back to the airport, and we said to each other, isn't it just crazy that someone's actually making this movie? Like, this is a crazy movie to make. And then we said, wouldn't it be crazy if we actually got to work on it? And then a couple of months later, we got a call that made us very happy, which was, you guys will be working on Onward with Dan Scanlon. And, we were thrilled. It's been a great experience from the very beginning right till now. We've been thrilled with the opportunity and the work we got to do for him.
Were you guys fans of let's say, the fantasy genre growing up, or is working on something like Onward like a relatively new playing field for you guys?
Oh no, that's the other thing. Not only did the biographical story hit us as familiar, but the whole fantasy world. We went to high school in the 70s, and I mean, we literally both had friends who had bands that like Guinevere, like that had the airbrushed, fantasy, album cover or Gandalf or whatever on the side. Shadowfax. We grew up reading Lord of the Rings. Like everyone in high school, read Lord of the Rings through high school, and the album covers were all like fantasy art. So fantasy was very much like a part of our growing up. So for us, yeah, Onward was just weirdly specific to us, like the story of the two brothers, the fantasy setting, the music, which, and we listened to early progressive rock, like early Genesis and King Crimson and Gentle Giant and all that stuff. And so it was fun that when Dan asked us to do music for Barley's Van, for Guinevere, the airbrushed, what looks to us like a 70s van, to fill it with. So we had fun, like dusting off the Mellotron and synthesizers and playing, music that we used to play in bands together as kids, just kind of doing a sort of a prog rock kind of, a mashup with early 90s garage band, kind of sound stuff as well. But for us, it's like a progressive rock kind of setting. And yeah, so fantasy was definitely a big part of our growing up, as something that we felt really at home playing with.
It's funny because I was going to ask if there was any other aspects of this story that really drew you to it besides like the father and the brother story, but it seems like this film kind of hit everything on the mark for you in terms of we have to work on it.
Yeah, it was just one of those, it was like synchronicity. It just, that film and us, it was just a perfect match. And working on it, we had all these crazy moments, with the story of the brothers. And I think we learned things about ourselves and about our relationship and about each other through this movie, which sort of surprised me. I tended to just think, okay, this is this really cool movie, we got to like figure it out. But then I found myself going, oh, wow, this is like crazy insight into our own lives. And that's what really made this movie utterly unique, I think, for anybody. I don't think Dan knew that we had the story that he did when he hired us. I think he just had a feeling and liked the Good Dinosaur score, I think, and just had a, vibe something from us that he thought was going to work. But I think what he was getting off of us was our connection to this story. I don't know, a brother to brother to brother to brother thing, I guess, that he sensed. And I think it was just a perfect storm for us creatively, and a great time.
I feel like movies, in a way, it's a cathartic experience in a way, right? Making, obviously, like you said, learning more and more about each other that you probably didn't know. And I remember seeing one piece with you guys saying like this film was an act of therapy in a way.
Right.
Yeah. It was in the sense that, we're brothers that, I guess some brothers are very effusive, but we don't really talk about this stuff ever. So,
now you're forced to.
I think a lot of brothers will relate to that. That, yeah, there's just like really, like in a way, you're more likely to talk about sports or stupid BS than the really important stuff. And it's there, but you talk around it for sure. So this did make us have to finally kind of through music have those conversations and and kind of look at things that we had never really thought about, and just like how it affected our relationship. That was not anything that I never thought about that. Losing a father and what that means to your relationship with your brother. That's not something I ever analyzed, but yeah, I was kind of forced to while working on the film. I had to really think about that stuff and pull out old memories, and yeah, and some of that was kind of painful, and yeah, but therapeutic, and kind of give you a better understanding of things, and make you feel better about turned out, and just yeah. So I think the film works for anybody. It's not just the very specific story of two brothers who lose their father, but everyone goes through loss, and every family goes through tragedy, and it's kind of what you do after that, and how you are there for each other. That's the story of Onward, really, not the tragedy, and so that's something that I think we all can relate to, and I think it's something that it's very uplifting, and in a way it's kind of obvious, I guess, and it's not like a huge revelation, but I think it's something that is really comforting, and yeah, it's something that is a helpful message for everyone to see and watch.
What was it like creating the unique themes for Ian and Barley?
Well, we really enjoyed the fact, like Mike said, that we could tap into part of our childhood, part of our musical childhood, some of that prog rock of the 70s. It was also a film that really suited our love of mixing non-orchestral elements with orchestral elements. We'd like to do that for a long time. And so obviously a film that's sort of about, a fairy tale land and like a Brothers Grimm kind of thing. We were able to pull out our medieval instruments. We have a lot of stuff like that. We have a lot of stuff we play. I have a guitar collection of all these crazy old like lutes and bouzoukis, saturns, things like that. So we were able to pull that stuff out. We found some of our gang of medieval players who play folk harps and all sorts of interesting stuff like that. And we were able to do what we love to do, which was to take, the sound of a Western orchestra and mix it with the sound of sort of Northern Europe sounds and Southern European sounds, and do that folk meets, that meets old time meets modern orchestra sound that we love to do. And it was just one of the many ways that Onward just seemed like such a perfect film for us, topically, musically, everything. And we were able to explore that stuff. And in the end, we even got to add, a large choir from London into the whole picture, just to be as over the top as possible when we needed to be. It was a lot of fun.
I am going to dive into spoilers just a tad, not too much, but because the film is already out. But tell me if I'm on the right track here. But I know that, so the final song on the soundtrack is called Magic Returns. Obviously, magic is sort of infused back into the world again. And the song, at least to me, kind of seems like a mix of Ian and Barley's core musical cues, where it's like the drums of Barley mixed with the folk uplifting tone of Ian. And I don't know if that was intentional or not, but at least that's what I pulled from it.
Well, this is what's great about music and art in general, is that, yeah, you're right. I mean, that's a great analysis. I mean, Jeff might go, oh yeah, I knew that, but
100%, 100. We right on the ball.
I don't think I ever. I mean, we certainly knew we were mixing the several themes there. But that's a really interesting analysis, and honestly, that's what happens as you're creating music. And once you get really, like, you spend 16 hours a day for 6 days a week, and do that for a couple of months on something, and you're pretty dialed in subconsciously, and stuff like that happens. And then, yeah, people go, hey, by the way, and it often is unconscious, subconscious, and there are these great connections that other people can see that you may or may not have directly intended, but Yeah, I like it. I like your analysis. I think it's
successful interview. What would you say were your favorite scenes to score in the movie for both of you?
Boy, that's I would say the poignant ones kind of stood out because they were the ones we had to sort of like dig into sort of our own emotional past maybe the most. It didn't mean they were the favorite ones, but they were certainly memorable. So I think probably, if I can speak for Mike for a second, probably the cue called Little Brother, and then the cue at the end, which I can never remember because they kept changing the title of, where one of them, spoiler alert, meets their father. Those were two cues where, obviously we had to sort of think about, you can't help but think about yourself when you're writing for these characters that seem to be sort of have these parallel on-screen elvish lives that parallel your own. So there were those two scenes definitely stood out as big ones, but it was a lot of fun writing that rock music for Barley's Van. We had a great time with that, really obviously referencing our teenage roots. That was a lot of fun too. And that came about 6 months before we dug into a lot of the stuff. So it was funny. Those are fun. Those are interesting bookends in our process, to start with the stuff that was really fun and reminded us of the joy of first playing our instruments when we were kids in that rock music, and then going to the stuff that was emotionally heavier, but we were able to cull sort of our experience in orchestral music at the end. And those were kind of emotional and aesthetic bookends for us as far as writing cues goes, I think.
Michael, anything to add to that stupendously eloquently answer?
Yeah. No, that's pretty much it. I mean, for like writing cues, writing for a scene is I would never call it fun. I mean, the only fun time sometimes a cue you just nail it like right away. And like I can think of a cue in the film where it was fun to write because it just came so easily. so but that's not really, look, I think the real enjoyment and fun for a composer is after you're done writing and you get to hear, in our case and in this case, like just some of the world's best musicians play it and sing it. Like that's when you get the goosebumps and the hair stand up on the back of your neck. You hear the choir singing, stuff that you had mocked up on a crappy choir sample, and then these guys just like the first take, and you're just like, oh wow, like just
like, oh, I did that.
Beautiful. And yeah, just the thing like where they're in the cave, they're on the river, they're on the giant Cheeto, and they're going in the cave, and the you see the huge kind of Tolkien-esque carvings of these big wizards and things, and there's a choir there. I mean, that's just, and you hear the orchestra play and the choir singing. That's when the composers are, that's the moment composers are like, damn, I'm glad I'm a composer. Everything before that, not so much.
This pain.
Yeah, there's a lot of struggle, and as Jeff said before, it's this kind of mad dash to the finish line, and you're under a lot of time pressure as well as quality pressure. So you're kind of like trying to, just do your very best and just make the best possible score you can, and you have a clock ticking. It's stressful. It can be, there's definitely moments of fun and breakthrough where you're struggling and something opens up and you're like, oh damn, yeah, that's it. And that now that's a great theme. I really feel this moment now, and yeah, those are good feelings, but you don't have time to relish them because you're like, oh, that's great.
Yes.
Okay, next scene. Like, now these sprites, what are we going to do with them? So you don't really enjoy it as a composer until the band is playing it. That's really, and then of course you still have time pressure. Like, okay, that was great. Okay, next cue.
Keep it going.
There's always that going on. So, but this movie was, I mean, you've heard from what we've said, like this meant a lot to us personally. Working with Pixar, who are, they're just the best game in town. They're the best to work with. They're so collaborative, and the creativity is absurd. The level of creativity, there's so much, and all the little details in the film, and it's just, it's just been a fantastic experience from beginning to end. Definitely a highlight of a career working on a film like this, and one that was so personally resonant for us makes it all the more special and kind of once in a lifetime.
See, that kind of, I was gonna ask to wind it down, take up not much more of your quarantine time. I was gonna ask if there were any dream franchises, or since my site kind of deals in a little bit more of like pop nerd culture, any superhero dream franchises, but this film seems like one of the dreams to work on. Do you have any other ones?
I think we just like anything where we can be a little bit outside the box, and that does tend to almost automatically define itself as fantasy, or the comic book realm, things that are super real and or fantastical. We did a couple of films for Terry Gilliam, and one of them, The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, that was another one of those films in this, I think that anything where we get to stretch and have some of the fun that we like to have the most. I mean, sometimes a film, it's just going to have a smaller palette and a smaller box to work in because that's what the film is, and that's totally acceptable and right. It's just, it's set in New York City. It's a love story or something. There's certain, we are working on the canvas that the film gives us. So any of those things you mentioned, those franchises and superhero movies, they give you a big canvas. They give you something otherworldly, and I think that's a word we like to embrace. That's one of the things that the advent of CG really has opened up the realm of otherworldly and fantastical, because now filmmakers can dream it up and put it on the screen, and we're happy to go there with them musically. It's a great era in that way.
Mychael and Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time today to talk to me. This is by far the coolest interview I've ever done for the site. To have people of your caliber on it. I loved Onward, making sure everybody I know is seeing it, and much like me, enjoy your quarantine time.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can all go outside soon. But thank you both, gentlemen, for just taking the time today.
For sure, man. Cool, thank you so much. Appreciate your passion for it.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks,
you
Nick.
Guys have a terrific
all the best.
day.
Yeah, stay safe and have fun editing that, making us sound smart.
Woo! Thanks, guys.
Right.
All right, bud.
Bye-bye.